So guys, we're getting ready to go on live on Newsmax, and I just wanted to read some talking points here because I want you guys to all go to this website, sigar.mil, M-I-L, right? It's a Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction. They've done 13 years of audits on the reconstruction effort in Afghanistan and have issued 11 reports to the president, to the vice president, to Congress, and all this. So we've got 20 years, $145 billion in reconstruction aid, $837 billion in defense spending, which means 85% of the funds spent in the reconstruction effort in Afghanistan was spent toward turning a renewable force of fighters into a fine red mist, right? Just creating more fighters. And on top of that, on top of all those failures, and if you notice the timeline, you do the backwards planning, this was started during the Obama administration. So Biden can't say they didn't see these things coming for over a decade, right? So they also requested $3 billion of additional aid in the failing effort behind the war in Afghanistan. 3,587 U.S. and allied service members killed, 20,666 wounded, over 48,000 Afghan civilians killed, 75,000 Afghan civilians injured. We went to Afghanistan in revenge for 9/11 for 3,000-ish deaths. And look at what we did as a nation in response. Look at the army and the fuel that we built. If you compare that to the amount we've killed and injured on their side, imagine the army and the force they can build behind that coming back toward us, right? I think Gandhi said it, if an eye goes for an eye, pretty soon we'll all be blind. I think that's the line. So the SIGAR's issued 427 audits, 191 special reports, 52 quarterly reports on comprehensive lessons learned. First point on the strategy, and you guys just read the first 5 pages, right? I bet you can't go 5 minutes without swearing. Point number 1, strategy. The U.S. government continuously struggled to develop and implement a coherent strategy for what we'd hoped to achieve. Department of State was supposed to lead the reconstruction efforts, but it lacked the expertise and the resources to take the lead on their own strategy in Afghanistan. Initially, we tied the destruction of Al-Qaeda, then we moved it to the Taliban, then we moved it to corrupt Afghan officials, which is mission creep. That's all that it is, right? The U.S. government was simply not equipped to undertake something this ambitious in such an uncompromising environment, no matter the budget. This is uniform in all the SIGAR reports for the last decade. Right? They can't say they didn't know what was going on. Timelines. The U.S. government consistently underestimated the amount of time required to rebuild Afghanistan and created unrealistic timelines and expectations that prioritize spending quickly. We prioritize money over objectives. These choices increased corruption and reduced the effectiveness of programs. This is not a 20-year effort. This is 21-year efforts. U.S. officials prioritize their own political preferences for what they wanted the reconstruction to look like rather than what they could realistically achieve. All right, let's see here. Troops and resources continue to draw down in full view of the Afghan government's inability to address the instability and to prevent it from worsening. They can't say they didn't know because this report goes directly to the president. This is in writing on a government website from lawyers and auditors that we send to Afghanistan to know this stuff. They've been giving quarterly reports for 11 years on this.
Give the URL again.
All right, the URL is sigar.mil. All right, guys, I think I'm about to be on the...
Hi, Matthew, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, cool. So, we're going to be with you in about 6 minutes.
Perfect, thank you. All right, I got 6 minutes, guys. Can somebody keep a timer? I'm going to continue reading this just astounding report, sustainability. Many of the institutions and infrastructure projects for the United States were not sustainable. The U.S. government often... Yeah, you got me?
Yeah. So Holly will just do a lead-in, so it might not be exactly minutes, but she'll lead you in, okay?
All right, perfect, thank you. The U.S. government often failed to ensure its projects were sustainable over the long term. Billions of reconstruction dollars are wasted on projects that went unused and fell into disrepair. All right, guys, we're in the hold wait game for the media. This is what it's been like nonstop. We're going to be on Fox News tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to be studied on these facts, and I'm going to be savage on the news. This is unacceptable what's going on right now. Turn the media up so you guys can hear.
Streaming news now. This is Chicken News.
Okay, it's great to see you. Now still ahead, we cross live to former US Army Ranger Matthew Griffin for the latest on Afghanistan. Afterpay Day is happening right now. Is this boost in online shopping exactly what Aussie retailers need right now? And it happened to KFC, but now another restaurant chain has shut down for the same reason. But first, here's what's happening right now. A humanitarian crisis is underway in Afghanistan as world leaders and not-for-profit organisations work tirelessly to protect and uphold the rights and freedoms of Afghan citizens. This comes as the United Nations says the Taliban has so far allowed their work to continue uninterrupted and without interference. However, we are also hearing reports that women are being forced to stay inside their homes and forego any work or extracurricular activities. It does not appear that these restrictions are being ordered by senior leadership, and it does seem that the Taliban is allowing some women and girls to continue their education. We were joined by Daniel Wordsworth, the CEO of World Vision Australia, earlier on. Now, he says the Taliban has provided assurances to the organisation that they have reformed.
Getting reassurances from the Taliban that they have changed, that things will be different this time. And we've actually been working, there have been parts of Afghanistan that have been under control by the Taliban for some time. And so we are used to, in those environments, trying to work to protect families, children, and to keep kids in school and to keep our staff working. And many of our staff are women. And so we have female teachers, we have female doctors and nurses, and they work in those environments. And that's our plan going forward. I was just before this call talking with our national director, the person who runs our work in Afghanistan. She's based in Kabul. She's a woman. And all of us are resolved to, finding the world as we have it, and then saying, how do we transform this world into one that works for children and for the families that we're in? And that's what we're going to be doing.
Now, Wordsworth also says World Vision will be there every step of the way to provide the necessary support and assistance to those who need it the most.
The political powers that be may be deciding to move their security forces out of their country. But what I would ask, and I would hope from the Israeli people, is that does not mean that we're leaving. World Vision remains. Teams remain on the ground. Afghan families and communities remain. That they're part of our sort of human family, and that we're staying committed, and that we hope, as always, and we trust, as always, in the generosity of the Australian people to empower us and to allow us to stay there with them.
And US President Joe Biden appeared on an exclusive interview with the ABC. Here's the moment where he was pressed by George Stephanopoulos on whether America's exit could have been better executed.
When you look at what's happened over the last week, was it a failure of intelligence, planning, execution, or judgment?
Look, I don't think it was a failure. Look, it was a simple choice, George. When the Taliban, let me put it another way. When you had the government of Afghanistan...
Guys, I'm still not on the air yet, but I need you to listen to these words that are coming out right now.
Taking off and going to another country. When you saw...
It's a failure to plan on leadership levels at all levels.
The,
top down,
of the,
bottom
Afghan
up.
Troops we had trained, up to 300,000 of them, just leaving their equipment and taking off.
They were ordered to give up weapons. There's videos all over the internet, all the reports that we're hearing that the guys were ordered, the commanders were told to stand down. It was handed over.
Into a C-17, we've seen Afghans falling.
That was 4 days ago, 5 days ago.
What did you think when you first saw those pictures?
Discredits the family of loss of life as a number of days. Just get over it, guys.
This more quickly. We have to move in a way in which we can take control of that airport. And we did.
So you don't think this could have been handled, this exit could have been handled better in any way? No mistakes?
No, I don't think it could have been handled in a way.
This fires me up, guys. Straight up fires me up.
Look, but the idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how that happened.
So for you, that was always priced into the decision?
Yes.
Now, we were also joined by Cheddar's political director, Megan Pratt, a short time ago, who says Biden is standing firm on his decision, but it isn't necessarily a good look for his presidency or his legacy.
States. So I will say the one thing working
Good look. That's what they're concerned about, everybody. They're concerned about optics.
He has remained firm in his
6
decision
minutes.
making. People appreciate that even if they disagree. And the other thing that's working for him is that Americans do not want to be in Afghanistan anymore. So while this is devastating, I haven't really heard a whole lot of people come out and say publicly, lawmakers, that we need to send 10,000 American troops back in there to stabilize this country. It more so seems that at this point, we're just trying to get everyone out who needs to get out or who wants to get out and sort of leave the country to figure itself out. At one point, the president said this week, how long should I have sent America's sons and daughters, men and women, to fight in Afghanistan's civil war? I think that messaging strategy is going to be most effective, even though right now, honestly,
Messaging strategy on a civil war.
Incredibly bad for him. This is a very big black mark on what has been ultimately a very short presidency.
Now, this all follows two press conferences that took place in the US, one by the State Department and other by the Pentagon. The two agencies have confused reporters with conflicting opinions as to the safety and security of the evacuation operation that is currently underway. Now, whilst the Pentagon says the ongoing operation is safe, the State Department has declared that it cannot guarantee safe passage for those wanting to flee. In the same briefing, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin also addressed the public and outlined his three main concerns regarding the situation on the ground when it comes to bringing US residents and their allies back home. Firstly, it's the safety and security of Americans and the people officials are trying to evacuate. Austin says there are currently 4,500 troops on the ground who are ready and equipped to defend themselves and their operations. Secondly, US troops are working tirelessly to ensure Kabul's main airport remains open for secure and safe passage. Finally, the department wants to ramp up evacuation efforts over the coming days, increasing the flow of aircraft and people out of Kabul. Turning to Australia's response now, and earlier Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young told Ticker News that she believes Australia has done it too little, too late.
Because of course people have...
Sorry guys, they just keep going. They're supposed to intro me in. Yeah, buddy.
Coming to you in about 50 seconds.
Got it. Thank you.
If you're a woman, a
Thanks.
young girl, if you are
1 minute.
the minority,
Give me the 30-second count, Lee. I love it. That fires me up every time.
community member, then life is going to be pretty tough.
30 seconds.
In fact, people are fearing. for
Shuffle
their
to the
lives.
door.
I'm really concerned that Australia has left it so late to get those who worked alongside us, worked for our defence forces out of Afghanistan, to get their families out as well, because it's not just about getting the interpreters and the actual workers, but the Taliban are brutal and they go after people's families, and they do that to send a message to everybody else in the community to not resist. I think this is a really horrible situation where we've seen Australia act too slow, and sadly, it's going to cost lives.
Now, continuing on this story, former US Army Ranger Matthew Griffin joins us now. Matthew, it's great to have your company. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on Ticker.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm looking forward to talking to you about this. What questions do you have?
Matthew, I wanted to start our conversation. Now, you have a factory and a school in Afghanistan. Can you just explain to us what communication you've had with your workers who are there at the moment?
So we employ one factory in Afghanistan with 44 men and 36 women, and they're currently sheltering in place. The factory manager has wiped all of his phones, destroyed all of his records that he works with us at our request, because we don't want the Taliban to find that he's worked with U.S. companies. We're currently trying to get his family out, his sons out of country, because he's afraid they're going to be forcefully recruited into the Taliban. We work with 13 schools in northern Afghanistan, and all of the administrators and families are trying to get out of the country right now. I think everybody's concerned. They have armored cars on corners. They're searching everybody. They're searching cell phones. And I think what they're counting on is they're going to allow the educated people to leave that could possibly revolt. And then once the brain drains out of country, they're going to have a poor, oppressed population that they can control. And we're going to see a mass evacuation here, and that's what's happening right now.
It's so heartbreaking, isn't it? And I mean, the Taliban insist that they won't go back to their old ways, in particular the treatment of women and girls. Do you believe them?
I think the best indicator of future performance is past performance. And this, as the saying goes, we have all the watches, they have all the time. They're waiting for us to leave and they're waiting for us to take our attention off their country, and they're going to go back to their old ways. This is what's going to happen. I'm not wrong on these calls.
Oh, it's so heartbreaking, isn't it? It's so heavy to hear this kind of news. What is their reality like now? And I know this is a tough question, and obviously for you, it's obviously very heartfelt, but what is their reality like now?
I mean, just imagine the fear that you would have having to stay in your home waiting for the knock on the door. They're going home to home right now. They're going through individual houses looking for people and names on lists. Everybody's trying and hoping and scrambling to try to get to the airport, and they don't even know if they can get there safely. What we're hearing is that it costs $1,500 to get an escort from the Taliban to the office, and if your name's on a list, it can cost upwards of $100,000 to get out. And it's tragic, and they just know that once everybody leaves, the Taliban's going to have full reign, and they're going to be able to do whatever they want.
So, Matthew, what happens to your factory there now? Is everyone trying to flee and get out, or what happens from here forward?
Right now, everybody's sheltering in place. They're waiting for the dust to settle, and they're trying to get out as much as they can. And as far as our factory goes, we're still undetermined at this time. And we're undetermined. Would anybody want to buy anything from Afghanistan anymore? Because they're afraid it's going to support the Taliban. So from a logistical standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, from a perception standpoint, are people going to want to support poor Afghans moving forward just trying to earn a living because of the Taliban? It's a huge problem that's going to last for decades.
In your eyes, what are the failures in Afghanistan?
The failures in Afghanistan are we just didn't listen to the reports. If anybody wants to go, you can go to a website, sigar.mil, sigar.mil. 11 years of consecutive reports of the failures that we've had in Afghanistan as an international community. None of our elected officials and politicians have paid attention to those reports that have come out significantly. And they outline all of the failures and what we could have done to improve, and nobody listened to any of them. And we kept spending money, and we kept doing it over and over again. That was the issue, is our leaders didn't listen to the information that they had for over a decade.
Yeah, and I mean, can you also explain the risk now to global terror threats in the future by having the Taliban back in power in Afghanistan?
So I witnessed this in Iraq in 2017 because I was there during the fall of the retaking of Mosul from ISIS. And I got to go build schools in Yazidi refugee camps, and I got to talk to these women about how 90% of their population was genocidally murdered by ISIS. Now we have reports of those same types of people infiltrating into Afghanistan, leading Taliban units, and they're just waiting for the time to commit those atrocities. This is going to be the same thing that's going to happen. And we repeated those mistakes 5 years ago, and now we're watching them unfold again.
Yeah, and Matthew, what are you doing to support, I guess? Obviously, you've got ties to Afghanistan with your business there, and obviously the work that you do in the schools there, which must be so incredibly hard for you right now and heartbreaking. What are you doing to support as best that you can, and what can everyone else do to support at the moment? We've
been in an effort to get our interpreter out, for a special operations interpreter, for the past 4 months, and thankfully the UK received him on August 1st. We have a GoFundMe campaign. You can find it on our website, combatflipflops.com. Any excess funds will be used to help us resettle as many families as we possibly can. So if you feel like donating, you can trust that we're going to use it to help as many families as we can resettle their lives once they get to refugee camps.
Oh, incredible. Matthew, I just want to thank you so much for coming on to Ticker to speak about this. It's such a heartfelt topic, and it must be super hard for you. So I really want to thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you very much. Tearing it down around the world, folks. Yeah, we're watching all of these things. I'm just going to continue reading this SIGAR report because you guys probably are still fired up after this, right? So where did I leave off? Sustainability. U.S. agencies seldom judged by their projects' continued utility, but by the number of projects completed and dollars spent, right? They didn't judge them by how effective these programs were. They were just effective. There's a program, let's check it off the block, and how much money did we spend on it? Personnel, this is my favorite. U.S. personnel in Afghanistan were often unqualified and poorly trained, and those who were qualified were difficult to retain. DoD police advisors watched American TV shows to learn about policing. Civil affairs teams were mass-produced via PowerPoint presentations, and every agency experienced annual lobotomies as the staff constantly rotated out, leaving its successors to start from scratch and make similar mistakes over and over again. This was particularly true for civilian agencies such as the State and/or U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, which should have been leading the effort, but were unable to meaningfully perform that role. Right, guys, like read this report, sigar.mil. This has been going on for 11 years, every quarter. Our policymakers have been ignoring this. They've been taking your tax dollars, they've been putting your sons and daughters at risk behind information that they knew for over a decade. This is not a partisan issue. This is a leadership issue. You guys should be like a pit bull on a pant leg with your freaking representatives, forcing them to answer the questions why they didn't take any action. We need to cancel the authorized use of military force, which allows endless military spending globally for our Department of Defense. And then we need to get them to relook all of this SIGAR information and figure out how we're going to act as an international player moving forward. We cannot allow our congressmen, senators, presidents, anybody, any of our elected officials and appointees to continue down this path of known failure. And with that, people, go forth, charge, take it to them.